this note, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you all, depending on where you are joining us from. It's really a great pleasure to welcome you to this session, this much anticipated session, which happens to be the third in our series of dynamic energy exchanges. This session is supported or designed to support the sustainable energy transition in cities and regions, and we are pleased to highlight that it is brought to you or has been made possible through the support and kind courtesy of the German Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Action. And of course, we proudly brought to you by ICLEI World Secretariat and our partners. My name is Felix Akrofi. I'm Senior Officer, Sustainable Energy at the ICLEI World Secretariat. And it's my pleasure to be the moderator for this session today. Next slide, please. So for the benefit of those who are joining us for the first time and may not be familiar with ICLEI yet, I would like to say a few introductory words and also draw the context for today's session. ICLEI is a global network of more than 2,500 local governments and regions. These local governments and regions are committed to sustainable urban development. So we drive policy and we influence policy and drive local action in all of these critical but also interconnected pathways, which include low emission development, nature-based development, equitable and people-centered development, resilient development, and circular development pathways. Next slide, please. So zooming in into our work or the work we do under the global sustainable energy transition, we envision a situation, or we envision the cities and regions to be powered or have energy sources as their we envision a situation where we would see our cities and regions being fully powered, having their economies powered through renewable energy sources. So these include geothermal, ocean, bioenergy, hydro, wind, and solar. And for this underpin how we define renewable energy. And for this, we have also endorsed the definition for renewable energy by the IRENA Coalition for Action. Next slide. And it is in this context, next slide, please. And it is in this context that we have designed and are implementing the 100% Renewable Cities and Regions Roadmap project as one of our flagship projects among many others, where we epitomize how we work with local and regional governments across both across both global north and global south. So here we support these cities and regions not only to develop roadmap and policies, but also strengthen and build their capacities of particularly of key stakeholders. We also envisage the situation, the context where we support them and enable them to develop financing and implementation mechanisms to ensure that they hone the benefits or the outcomes of this project and make themselves inclusive and take ownership of this project whilst we develop them. Next slide, please. So this graphic depicts the journey that we go with cities and regions from planning to implementation. And from every step of the way, one thing that is critical is that cities and regional governments need to build capacities in order to be able to address the challenges that are facing them to be able to complete this journey in a more effective and efficient manner. And that is where the energy exchanges come into play as one of the tools and resources that we make available for the capacity building of cities and regions. Next slide, please. So the energy exchanges is essentially a series of virtual exchanges offering deep dives into solutions for the local sustainable energy transition. And it has been developed and being implemented for the purposes of bridging the planning and action gaps and through capacity building, but with focus on the local context. And indeed, it is targeted at local government practitioners and experts in the domain. Next slide, please. So today, I have already indicated that this is the third of the series of the energy exchanges since we launched it last July. And today's topic of agrivoltaic is an interesting one. And it is not only interesting, but also timely, in my opinion, because for the simple reason that a joint approach to energy transition and to the transformation of agri-food systems, on the other hand, is crucial, not only to achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement, but also the Sustainable Development Goals. Next slide, please. And so for today, we are very elated to feature our expert speaker, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the National Solar Energy Federation of India, in the distinguished person of Subrahmanyam Pulipaka. Subrahmanyam Pulipaka is, yes, as I indicated, is the CEO of the National Solar Energy Federation of India. And the National Solar Energy Federation of India is the largest umbrella body for the solar energy ecosystem, which works in a complementary manner to realize India's ambition, solar goals, and represents the Indian solar industry. He is also the chair of the Renewables in Agriculture Working Group at Arena Coalition for Action, and has also been appointed the UNDP Energy Governance External Advisory Group member. He is recipient of the Briggs Young Scientist Award in 2018, and Subrahmanyam also specializes in solar model reliability and has published scientific journals across various internationally acclaimed journals. It is our pleasure to have you with us, Subu, and we, at this opportunity, we are keen to follow and learn from you in order to effectively navigate some of the technicalities of agrivoltaics and also spur the energy transition in our urban spaces. So without much ado, I am handing over to you, and I think I'll say the floor is yours, Subu.
Thank you very much, Felix, and a very good morning and good afternoon to all of you who have joined today's session. I have a presentation with me. I'll be taking all of you through the technicalities of Agri-PV and the financial aspects and business models of it, and then sort of end it with the policy and regulatory suggestions. Just while the this presentation comes up, I would like to sort of take you through the concept of co-locating agriculture with renewables has not just benefit from the food chain and food security, energy security point of view, but can also help the governments, especially the local governments, achieve their sustainability targets. Let me first, like I said, I've divided this presentation into three parts. First part is on the concept of agrivoltaics, what agrivoltaics is, how co-location works, and then second, we spend a little bit time on the business models, and then we can quickly go to the policy and regulatory aspects, and we can have a question and answer session at the end. Next slide. So now today, if you look at it, agrivoltaics is a concept of co-locating solar and agriculture, but we don't limit it necessarily with conventional cultivation, but also take into consideration the allied ecosystem. In some countries today, agrivoltaics is now called as eco-voltaics or eco-PV. where you are combining the entire ecological ecosystem around it. Generally, solar power generation is considered to be, okay, production is based on the land parcels that are arid and not suitable for cultivation. While the world is now in the developing countries as well as the developed countries, land has come up to become a very huge challenge. So co-locating solar with agriculture is now finding its way through the entire spectrum of the governments as well as the private sector. If we go to the next slide, this is the broader definition of agrivoltaics. You can have a conventional solar system installed at a height, and then you do cultivation below, or you can increase the height of the structure so that you can also continue the conventional cultivation with machinery and others. You can do the co-location in farmlands, in grazing lands, in grasslands, or in lands that are suitable for horticulture. This is more or less the open side of the agrivoltaics. The closed side is today urban farming is also a very important aspect in our food security. And agrivoltaics can also be eluded to the urban farming through a closed agrivoltaics structures via greenhouses or building integrated photovoltaics. Greenhouses have now become very popular, especially in the Western Europe and even in East Asia, including Japan. And this is something that is an arrangement where in the greenhouses, instead of having a covering of screen or layer, you are filling it with solar panels. I will like to take you through some very good examples of such. But before I go there, today across the world, if you look at the way agrivoltaics is pursued, so we start with common commodity crops, where you install the crops in between the row spaces of solar installations. And in United States and today even in some parts of Germany and India, it is also being looked at from a livestock grazing point of view. There are some countries where there is a solar grazing association, where solar farms are built in such a way that cattle grazing can happen suitably. The third part is the specialty crops, where these are the crops that generally don't require much of sunlight. They can grow well under shade. In fact, they will grow better under shade than under direct exposure of sunlight. And the microclimate under the panel also is adjusted in such a way, or can get adjusted in such a way, that it will help you in curtailing the losses arriving from solar due to increasing temperatures. The fourth part is the greenhouse. Now we are sort of coming to the urban side of things, where the greenhouse can be fully or partially covered with solar, and the cultivation happens below. Of course, this is much more like a controlled environment, which is now suitable for most of the crops that are specific to each region. The last one, which we have not seen much of examples, maybe one or two here and there in different parts of the world, is on the rooftop agriculture, where you combine is a mixture of a terrace garden or terrace farming with solar on top. So I would like to show some good examples before I go into the technical aspects of agrivoltaics. So this is a conventional agriculture farm which has which was an agriculture land before, and now you just installed solar with 100% land use ratio, and you're growing conventional crops below. So this is one example of that. And the next example, you can see this is a different view of it, and the height is in sufficient manner for the farm equipment, including the tractors and other equipment and farming related tools that can be used in any conventional farming setup, which is here also. This is for flowers. So this is again in the western part of India. This is a conventional PV. The height is not elevated to a larger height, and it is specific to these crops, which would, in an ideal world, would have a better yield under shade. Next slide. This is the same farm from a different side. You have crops in interspace of the panel. So your conventional agriculture is happening, and the panel, it is happening between the rows of the solar panel. It's not directly under the solar panel. This is an example from again another western part of India, where the drip irrigation, micro irrigation, you can see the lines that are there, and conventional agriculture with conventional PV with no crops below the solar panel. This is an example of specialized crops. This is banana plantation and solar on top. Again, the light penetration here is not an issue. We have similar examples of this from Japan as well as in France. This is from Japan. This is a hybrid model of greenhouse plus conventional PV, and this is where in some parts of Japan, in this architecture, wheat and rice are also being grown. Next slide. This is another concept of vertical PV from Germany, from this company called Next to Sun, where you don't intrude technically in terms of the shadow. This is in one way a fence, in other way a boundary, or in a simpler form, it's a partition, and the shadow on the crops is not much. The generation is a byproduct, and agriculture is the main product. And again, there is no limitation on the crops that you can grow. So this is just an overview of how agri-PV plants look like. Now I would like to sort of take your focus through, give you a broader overview of how the business model is and who are the key stakeholders and how things work. So there are if you look at it, the 5 main components of this agrivoltaics. First, of course, is agriculture. Agriculture has both investment as well as the yield of the produce from agriculture. The land, which is an asset and a resource, which is common for agriculture and solar. Then the solar power plant, which is again an investment. And the 5th component is that tariff, with which you will supply the power either to government utility or private commercial and industrial establishment, or can be used for self-consumption. So we have studied quite a few models across the world, and I am trying to just present to you a summary of our observations on the business models. One of the key business model is that let's say it's in either a rural or urban setup. The solar developer goes to a farmer. He pays a lease rent to the farmer, installs the system on the farmland with his money, his equity. Here the farmer gets a fixed lease rate, while he can still continue the agriculture activity. And the developer who invests his equity and develops the product plant will sell the power to the discom or the utility in a local or a state government or intrastate or interstate. So in India, we are trying to find a business model where in some countries where we have seen that, because this is a smaller plant, the economics of scale are not in favor of such arrangement or establishment. So there are some countries where there is a premium on the tariff that the solar developer gets for investing in small scale installation on the farm. This is the first model. The second model is on the crop side. Very few models on this particular examples in this particular model exist, where if you can look at increasing the value of a crop by ascribing the solar or the sustainability angle to it, and the farmer might also get that premium on the solar crop on his yield, while everything else in the system remains the same. This is the second model. The third model is which we are trying to see in India, and mainly for small and marginal farmers, is that the farmer producer organizations, they are aggregators of, or they are membership bodies of a group of farmers. They own the solar asset. here the solar developer is not investing his own money, the FPO invests the money, and the generation, whatever solar comes out of, is directly paid to the FPO. And by the virtue of being part of the FPO, the farmer on whose land this solar system exists will get a part of the tariff as an additional income to the farm, to him. So this is diversifying his income stream. Not only he is going to make money from the agriculture yield, but he'll also have a component of the solar yield in his income. The fourth thing is which we are now seeing very interestingly developing in the Indian context is that most of the times the tariff given by the state utilities is not up to the mark or is not viable for anyone to invest in projects. But on the other hand, corporates do have their 100% RE goals, their net zero goals, and they need to procure power from renewable sources. So they often tend to invest or try to procure power from these kind of installations. So maybe a developer or FPO invests in the solar project, and then they have an off-taker who is a corporate. And then, of course, if it is an FPO, the farmer gets the tariff sharing, or if it is a developer, then the farmer will get a direct land lease per annum. The second model, which we are now sort of working out from an Indian context also, is that we have a lot of FMCGs who directly procure from farmers, and they do also have their 100% RE goals or their ESG goals. So why can't they invest in the solar installation on the farmland, and then they procure not just the farm produce but also the electricity from the same farm? So here the farmer gets both income streams from the procurer itself. So that is another model which we're briefly looking at. Now let us come back to the main aspect, or rather the main focus of today's discussion, which is on the framework for local governments in terms of the policy and regulatory aspects. If you look at the dimensions of this, it's pretty black and white, or here blue and white. Is agriculture is one of the main dimensions, where today agriculture, if it is small and marginal farmer, there is a need of diversifying income. If you have a land, you might want to have an extra crop. Today, thanks to climate change, soil fertility and quality, or even because of excessive use of pesticides and chemicals, you are experiencing a significant change in the quality of the soil. So this is one of the dimensions of the existing problems on the agriculture side. On the solar side today, land is a challenge. While rooftop is a very good solution for generating power where you consume, you also need ground-mounted installations. So co-location is going to address that, and you won't intrude in sensitive zones, and you're technically you're just another layer over existing activity. It's not an altogether new activity. And from a system perspective, the more the nodes, the more the spread, the better the stability. From the governance side, today land conflicts are a matter of everyday mainstream news, especially in countries where renewable energy goals are very, very ambitious and are being followed. Water table and the undue stress for water, not only from agriculture side, but also other activities related to industry or even solar is also an aspect. And of course, in the fight against climate change, procuring renewable power is also an important potential aspect, and that can also be, an aspect of advantage for agrivoltaics from a governance point. So now let us look at the holy grail of the convergence. Today we have, from a policy perspective, the countries and governments, local or regional or state level or federal, have renewable policies. They also have agricultural policies. On financing, there are streamlined mechanisms, state-driven, private-driven on RE financing, and state-driven, private-driven on agriculture financing. Agrivoltaics forms in the closest intersection of all these four aspects. So you need a cohesive policy that will accommodate renewables while not compromising on the agriculture or yields part of it, and a framework that can be less risky or more bankable for a financing institution. So let us now go into each of the stakeholder individually and see where each of them stand. For a solar developer, the advantage from agrivoltaics is that he can use the same land. So the land, searching for land, getting paid patches of land will be now a problem of past. There are hypotheses that have been proven that in a situation where there is agriculture below the panel, the microclimate is in such a way that it can help not decrease the performance, it may be promote or enhance the performance. Land conflicts will of course be less, and they would be in a position to I mean, there won't be compromising on the agriculture side of things so that you generate solar power. Because what will happen is, instead of a conflict of agriculture and solar, it becomes a coexistence of agriculture and solar. From the farmer side, additional revenue is they will be diversifying their revenue. Climate resilient agriculture or climate compatible agriculture is now a very important dimension of discussion as we are going through the harmful effects of climate change. All of us are aware, we have been experiencing it since last 2-3 months. It is going to be co-locating solar with agriculture is going to be one of the important solutions to make sure that the crop is also resilient. Of course, there will be second income, there will be extra job creation, and ultimately there will be a reduced dependency on fossil fuels for the procurement related to agriculture purposes. Because today agriculture, electricity is a very sensitive subject in many countries, and more often than not, it's powered by fossil fuels, and this is gonna help us move away from it. From a financial institution point of view, of course, ESG is a very key thing. If we are able to have coercive policies, risks will be less, and it is another interesting and high potential investment opportunity. From a utility point of view, you are able to meet your your mandate of renewable power procurement because you are distributed in nature and it's often at the tail end. Your transmission cost will reduce, which on a technical front can also help you achieve a stable grid irrespective of intermittent generation of solar energy. For the policymakers or the governance point of view, all of us are very now serious about our renewable goals. Some have 100% RE, some have net zero in 2040, 2050, 2030, 2070. This is going to help them accelerate their targets while also not compromising on other SDGs. While we focus on SDG 7, we have other SDGs which we have to focus on, and we will be in a position to address the remaining 12 also through this. And on the rural context, it will also help in increasing the socio-economic conditions. So, looking one step ahead, this is the last part of my presentation. We do have suggestions on the policy framework. Predominantly, there are 5 key pillars. First is, from a governance point of view, standards. Then building on the standards, regulations, along with regulation, incentives, and pilots and capacity building, which run parallel. If you look at the standards, on the incentives part, we need, of course, to look at the viability gap funding or subsidies to make this viable. Tax credits, feed-in tariffs from the solar side. From the agriculture side, this can also help. If there can be a mechanism where there is a concept of solar crops and there is a premium on the solar crop and they're insured, and then of course the farmer and the generator enter into long-term contracts, and there is an ecosystem that is getting developed there itself. On the standards part, of course, every country or maybe every region has to be, it should be specific to the region. We have seen Germany come out with the national framework. Italy last week came out with their policy. In India, we're in the process of building it. So there needs to be some standardization in terms of the structure, in terms of the crops, in terms of the irrigation models, as well as installation of solar and other aspects. In terms of the regulations, of course, this is something which is very sensitive. how much land can actually be under solar and how much land should be dedicated only for agriculture. In Germany, I think it's around 70%. In France, it is around 90% agriculture should be there. Maximum you can do solar is 10%. Uh, what zones can this be possible? In some countries, urban farms, it is not allowed. In some countries, urban farms, it is allowed. Regulations on the tariff and the metering. Maybe is there a possibility where you can use it as a captive generation and power the ecosystem there through maybe solar powered bulk milk chilling, solar powered cold storage, solar powered dryers, and then the farmer will not sell the yield but use the solar installation and the applications there, and then sell the semi processed input as a raw material to the industry. So this is some of the aspects where regulation is required. And most important aspect is the capacity building. This is a very interdisciplinary, interdepartmental intersection. So you need capacity building even in the governments, both departments of agriculture and energy. We need to do sensitization for farmers, maybe do it for the FPOs, and also have regular awareness campaigns to take the message to the system. Now, I have, before I end my presentation, I also have a small intervention of us where as NSEFI, we have understood that Agrivoltaics is a multi-stakeholder thing and it requires multi-stakeholder approach. So we have launched India Agri-PV Alliance a couple of months back. This is now alliance of not just solar side of stakeholders, but agriculture, financing institutions, FPOs, local communities, and think tanks and R&D institutions, of course, along with some policymakers. So this completes the entire value chain that has significant interest or involvement in the entire ecosystem of agrivoltaics. I want to end my presentation with two case studies. Both are very interesting ones. This farm this is my favorite example. This is a farm situated within 40 kilometers of my office, within 20 kilometers from the Delhi airport, the country's capital. The first farmer here invited a developer to install solar on his land. The developer pays rent to the farmer, land lease, and the farmer is in charge of agriculture. He is growing the crops. Previously, before solar was there, he was growing mustard, and his annual income was around 80,000 rupees in Indian currency, maybe around less than 1,000 US dollars, 1,500 US dollars per year. Now, after solar was installed, the water retention in the soil has increased by 40%. And the crops are shielded from the unseasonal rains and hails. And the crop cycle from 1 has now graduated to 3. I'll give you an example of last month. In last month, because of torrential rains and El Nino effect, India had faced unseasonal heavy rains and hails. Of course, this is the case with most of the countries today. And that has destroyed our tomato crops. And in the entire country, tomatoes from €0.5 per kilogram shot up to €3 per kilogram, the price, because of non-availability. In this farm, thanks to the solar, the crop was shielded from the hails and the rain. And they made, remember, their annual average income from the farm was less than $1,000, almost $1,000. And only by selling tomatoes, not a good example, but they made almost $8,000. So this is a classic example of co-location, land use effective utilization, climate smart agriculture and climate resilient agriculture, and something that can help increase and improve the socio-economic conditions of the farmer. So this is the details of the farm. It's 2 megawatt, and all the electrical cabling and every wire is overhead. Nothing touches the ground. It's a plug and play system. You can remove the system and transform it into another farm within the notice of days. And now from mustard, they have started growing eggplant, lettuce, spinach, okra, and other vegetable crops or fruit crops. This is a very classic example. The second example is on a different side of the country. This part is in Maharashtra. And this area of the state of Maharashtra is one of the most arid agriculture land in the country. Farmers have been facing huge problems here. One, because of lack of irrigation facility and the crop is rain-fed. Second, because of climate change, now rains are unpredictable. Third, they are not getting value of the crops even if they're able to produce, because of the climate, you never know which crop is going to get destroyed and how you have to shift your crop. They have installed solar. It's been 2 years since they've installed. Today, they have not only doubled their income from the agriculture, but they are also in a position to grow flowers which are specific to the region and supply them as per the season to the market. So this, in other aspect, of course, climate resilient agriculture and diversification of farmer income boost economic, all of these are there. But the second aspect is on the optimum use of resources, including water, land, and the energy. And second is to be in a position to not compromise on the food security while you are fighting the climate change with renewable installations. So this is my inputs for the presentation. I would like to stop here and maybe handing over to Felix so that we can take some questions from the audience here.
Absolutely. And thank you very much, Subu. This is amazing. This presentation I think, is very insightful. For my take, not only did you touch on the technology and the technicalities that comes with it in terms of the siting and co-location, but also you touch on the need for policy and the need for such to be enabled to make agrivoltaic thrive. And then you also, put the icing on the cake perfectly to show us some real case examples, which I think are interesting to and would stick to with us. I think maybe I should. We are basically officially entering into the more interactive session of the webinar, where we would take in questions and answers. So I would invite the participants to put their questions in the Q&A box, and then we will take them and address them accordingly. But in the meantime, maybe I can start with the question and answers, because it's interesting that from the beginning you showed us some of the various models of agrivoltaics. And one thing that jumped at me is the fact that in all of these models, there is no doubt a question of conflict between land and land resources or the land use. So where in cases where maybe there are already limited arable lands, but such would also be yielded for energy power generation. So that conflict is something that I think is really critical and might be a challenge for agrivoltaics. On the other hand, there is also the one thing that I also saw is shade is really one element that cannot be dismissed. And it kind of presupposes that for agrivoltaic, you can only combine it or is compatible with crops that are shade enduring, right? So what are your take on these technicalities and situation or phenomena that might pose a challenge to agrivoltaics? And for people who are listening and interested to go into this might be questions that would be on their mind, and I think your take and how we address this would be very interesting. So happy to hear your thoughts.
Thank you, Felix. I think both of your questions are the reason why we have started India Agri-PV Alliance here at NSEFI. Maybe let me answer one by one. First, on the conflict, it is a challenge, but every challenge is also an opportunity. If we look at the current state of affairs, you either convert an agricultural land to a commercial land and install solar, and then you just generate energy, or you say, agriculture is important, so that conflict is never ending. what if we are able to bring it together? That is the main concept which we are trying to promulgate through agrivoltaics. So I would personally see agrivoltaics as, I'm not saying it is a savior and we're going to solve all conflicts with agrivoltaics today, but, and again, there are countries which won't allow 100% of the agriculture land under solar. Minimum, maximum I have seen is 30% in Germany. 70% of the land should still have only agriculture, not solar. So I still think no capacity of solar is too small for us in our fight against climate change. And if we are doing that without compromising on our food security, then why not? So that is my way of looking at it. On the second aspect, crop side, how only specific crops, shade-loving crops have more potential here? There, I think we have an answer from the solar side of things. Today, we are at a position where the solar panel is no longer an opaque panel. It has become semi-transparent. As of today, we have bifacial modules where almost 40 to 50% of the light intensity passes through the module. So technically, it's not a shade. It's maybe like a greenhouse, or it's like a partial shade. And maybe we never know in future, the transparency can increase. So today, when we started agrivoltaics and where we are, the crops that can grow under solar have significantly increased. Not because of the crops getting adjusted to the shade, but because of solar getting adjusted to the aspects of the technical advancements in solar and the design aspects and the transparency. So I personally think that except for the staple crops like maybe wheat and rice and a few trees and agroforestry, more or less it is possible to grow them. How much of it makes economic sense, the feasibility, it has to be determined individually in the regions and in states. We cannot have a one solution that fits for all here. In fact, there's another important insight I would like to emphasize here. I chair the Renewables in Agriculture Working Group at ICLEI. In one of our first discussions, we have anyhow called for the global action to all the policymakers to stop working in silos and to, through an integrated manner, address agrivoltaics. But when we were initially looking at it, the percentage of GDP coming from agriculture, if you look at it, there are top 10 countries where the percentage is as high as 60% to 48, 50%. In these countries where agriculture contributes to the major source of GDP, how much of renewable energy is installed is what I try to look at. Unfortunately, these are the countries where the proliferation of renewables has not happened, one. And they are going to be the biggest victims of climate change. And by the virtue of becoming victims, the agriculture will also become victim of climate change, which will then distort the entire economical value chain of the countries backbone. So imagine a situation where your country's 60% of GDP is coming from agriculture, and because of climate change, your country's agriculture produce falls down by 40%. So we are now also looking at how the co-location can happen, how integration can happen, so that you balance it out and you stop the loop. The loop is simple. Today, they say 16% of the total emissions in the world come from agriculture, and that causes climate change. 28% come from fossil fuels, that causes climate change. And climate change is again responsible for spoiling the produce, decrease of yields, food security. So why don't we have solar, which is decreasing the fossil fuel dependency, and integrate the energy generation with agriculture, which will decrease the agriculture's dependency or their emissions, while shielding it from climate change effects. This is the loop we want to stop and take it forward.
Fantastic. It's great to know that the technology is already taking care of this situation we have on our hands with dealing with the shade. And also in terms of the policy environment, there is a model through which we can have such an integrated planning to be able to enable the space for agrivoltaics. So I think that is a good one, and it's well noted. yes, we're still inviting questions from the participants. So please don't hesitate, drop your questions in the Q&A box, and our expert speaker, Subrahmanyam, would be happy to deal with it. Yeah, so let the questions flow, let the questions come in. In the meantime, Subu, I will take the opportunity to ask one more question. You shared a number of business models in your presentation. And these models, I assume, are models that usually the model would be context specific because it might not play out in all other contexts. But it's the case that when it comes to the global south, that is where access to financing is a challenge. And so I would like to broadly ask you to expatiate a little bit more on out of the models that you have presented and from your experience, which one do you think would fit to the context of cities and regions in the global south, and the reasons that underpin such a thought?
Thank you very much, Felix, for the question. In fact, this is something which is very close to my heart. The global south is affected by lack of access to affordable capital, and the best model for global south is the business model 4, where the investment comes from the corporates who are procuring energy, or the FMCGs who are procuring energy and yield. There, the financing, the onus is on the corporates. The small and marginal farmers or the FPOs won't have the burden of raising capital. Because the thing about capital, especially in global south, is if the capital value is above 100 million or 200 million, it is available not at affordable rate, but it is at least accessible. But below that, it takes a lot of effort to get into this kind of financing mechanisms or arrangements. So my personal opinion, that is what we have been battling for India, where the business model 4, where the farmer owns the land, the consumer of the electricity will be a commercial or industrial establishment. They invest in the project and they procure the power at a tariff, which is, of course, for corporates, the tariff would be much lesser than the tariff they pay for the conventional electricity. And that will be in a way that can compensate the farmers, that can ensure that they have their second stream of income is also steady, while improving the climatic conditions in the location and not compromising on the food security. This is, according to me, the main important.
Amazing. Thanks so much for this response. We do have a number of questions from participants, so maybe I can relay those to you. The very first question is coming from Joshi, who is asking how agrivoltaic system is playing relevance in the Indian agricultural system in this current scenario of India. And he follows up also with a second one, which is asking if is agrivoltaic system playing an important role in India's target to net zero emissions?
No, India is predominantly an agrarian economy, although our GDP percentage contribution from agriculture is less than our services and other key aspects. But it is agrivoltaics is most relevant today in the Indian context. We have a lot of land conflicts, of course, when it comes to the solar or renewable energy installation side. So we think this is the solution for us to achieve our targets. When it comes to the net zero, which also contains emissions from agriculture sector and agriculture allied sector, including transportation, including processing, including pre-processing. I think there is no other solution than agrivoltaics today. Imagine a situation where you have a solar plant on an agriculture farm that powers an electric tractor or electric appliances in the farm. You are able to do your agriculture, conduct the cultivation without any carbon emission. You have a yield. Yield is again transported via sources that are powered by solar or processed via the application oriented things like cold storage or dryer or grinder or milk chilling, and that is also by solar. And then transport is again powered with electric from renewable power, and then the factory where the processing happens is again powered by solar or renewables, and then the end yield or end product which is coming to your supermarkets is again transported in a sustainable way, and you consume it in a sustainable way. So you are addressing the entire value chain, and this is the only solution for net zero.
Fantastic. So Gonzalo is mentioning or is asking, do you think this model can be applied in developing countries of South America like Bolivia?
In fact, South America has a huge potential. And no other continent has as much potential as South America when it comes to agrivoltaics. One, because of the land availability. Second, because of the variation of the crops that are grown there. And third, my favorite aspect is that the penetration of renewables in South America, except for few countries, has not been enough. And I think this is going to be a way in which the penetration also can be accelerated and can help us in reducing our dependency on from fossil fuels.
Thank you. We have a question from Joseph. I mean, it's a number of questions, but maybe I can take them, lump them up in twos, and then we take them like from there. So the first one is, I mean, has to do with the affordability of solar energy system. So the question is, how is the NSEFI making solar energy affordable in the first place? And what is the minimum PV capacity for agrivoltaics to be economically viable?
Well, NSEFI is a policy advocacy body. We are a member-driven organization. We represent 92% of India's solar sector. Through the means of advocacy of policies that are in the interest of the nation and the industry, we have been trying our level best to make sure solar is the most affordable source in the country. As of last year, solar is 50% cheaper than conventional power in India. So we have already achieved our target of making solar energy affordable in India at least. In terms of the minimum capacity for agrivoltaics, it depends upon the tariff, how it can be made economically viable. Today, maybe in India, at least 2 megawatt is required. If we get a better tariff, we can achieve it at even 500 kilowatts also. But of course, here the power cost is very, very less. But maybe in a setup of, I don't know, Western Europe or East Africa or even South America, I think you can zero in on somewhere between 500 kilowatt to 1 megawatt. The tariffs are higher there, so it makes it viable.
Understandable. One other question has to do with the fact that agrivoltaic systems use more steel than conventional PV systems. So the question is, at what ratio does this affect the decarbonization effort?
See, they use steel almost 20% more than the normal system. But again, it depends upon the system. If the structure height is normal, then the steel usage is normal. And I don't personally think you should look at it in a way that, okay, agrivoltaics uses more steel, so that might, distort the decarbonization somewhere. I think this is an integrated way on how you look at decarbonization. I am talking about decarbonizing agriculture and proliferating more renewables. While on the other side, maybe let's say a steel company produces steel with green hydrogen or procures power from solar and uses that to generate the heat and casting and then make steel, then doesn't matter how much my steel consumption increases, I would have not done anything to dent the decarbonization efforts. So I would see that in the days to come, at least in Indian context, doesn't matter how much our consumption of steel increases. We are moving towards sustainable production of steel, which has addressed the problem to begin.
Amazing. I see that a number of questions are still coming in, and but looking a quick check of the time, we might not be able to take this. But not to worry, we have a space or an avenue available where we would collect your questions and respond to you via email. So at this juncture, I would like to close the question and answer session, and also to thank you very much, Subrahmanyam, for your time and for helping us with this insightful learning on experiences on agrivoltaics. So before we close, I have a few slides to show you and share some information. Can we change to the next slide, please? So indeed, we are ending or closing this session, but it is by no means the end of our energy exchanges. So in the future, we have a number of sessions laid out. On the 4th of October, we would be hosting a session on heating and cooling from wastewater. So that promises to be very interesting, and it would be led by our expert speaker from URIC. And then subsequently to that, on the 16th of October, we expect, and we have actually planned, and we are very much anticipating to feature Schneider Electric, who would address the topic of energy efficient buildings. And again, in the month of October, before October closes, we would address the topic of innovative finance mechanisms, and that will be led by our Transformative Actions program. So please stay tuned and follow us as we conduct some of address these topics within the season 1 of our energy exchanges. And for sure, season 2 even promises to be bigger and better. Next slide, please. So for the questions that are yet to be, or for questions that unfortunately we didn't manage to answer for the purposes of time limitation, please do not hesitate to contact us using this email address. And it might not be direct questions, it might be opportunities that you would want to have for collaboration. Please, this is the avenue. Please reach out to us and we are happy to engage with you. Next slide. At this juncture, I would have to emphasize that we would not be able to have brought you these energy exchanges without the support of our partners. So on this note, we want to thank Subrahmanyam and team from the NSEFI, and also a big thank you to R2M Solutions, Urban Shift, Schneider Electric, URIG, and the TAP, which is the Transformative Actions Program. Thank you for your continued support, and we look forward to engaging continuous engagement with you. Next slide. On this note, I would like to thank you all. This is a personal gratitude from me to the participants for making the time, first of all, to engage with us, for making this session as interactive as possible, asking all the relevant questions. And we hope that this has been a very enriching experience for you. We would want to say thank you in this regard, and we wish you a good rest of the day and a happy weekend ahead.